This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get free access to Nebula, the streaming platform built by all your favorite YouTubers, when you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below. In the United States, every politician from the right to the so-called left assumes that the role of society is to create an even playing field for everyone to compete in. Usually, they only disagree on whether or not we're there yet. The idea is that regardless of where you start or how society perceives you, you should have the ability to leverage your talent and your effort to rise to the level you're capable of. Your accomplishments should be the only way by which you are granted status in society. Influence, wealth, prestige, whatever your aspirations. In a meritocracy, the rule is that the only way to get there is by doing something of merit. I don't like that notion, at least not all of it, and I'm gonna spend about 15 minutes on it, so strap in and enjoy the ride. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the way that meritocracy, once a slur thrown around by socialists, became the dominant ideology of the imperial core and the backbone of neoliberal capitalism. We're going to look at the reality of upward mobility in the US, and how meritocracy has been used to replace democracy with rule by an elite minority. This video is going to be a sort of part 2 to our previous episode on meritocracy. You don't have to have seen that one to watch this one, but if you'd like to start there, the link is in the description. So, let's start by getting a few things out of the way. As much as some politicians like to say it, we very clearly don't live in a meritocracy. Upward mobility, the idea that you can easily change your life from the circumstances you're born into with hard work or intelligence alone, does not exist. More than just about anything else, where you start has a massive impact on where you end up. For the majority of millennials and Gen Z, the rule actually seems to be downward mobility. Specifically, the likelihood that a millennial or Gen Z American will attain a higher standard of living than their parents is in the low 40%, meaning well over 50% of people will experience a downward trajectory over the course of their lives. That's a group-based analysis, and at the individual level, things aren't much better. For someone born in the lower quintile of income distribution, the odds that they'll make it into the top quintile is only 10%, half as much as it should be in a meritocracy. For most people, there's a far greater chance that you'll either remain in the quintile you were born into, or the one immediately below or above you, even more so if you aren't straight, white, or a man. In over 50% of cases, the inequality your parents experienced, their social standing, is directly passed down to you. And for a country that has branded upward mobility with its name, the American Dream, the US is pretty terrible at actually guaranteeing it. Among wealthy nations, the US is only 16th in upward mobility, and there's a good chance that number is only going to go down. Unsurprisingly, this is the outcome of the United States neoliberal political program. Fans will know I've already spent a lot of time talking about liberalism on this channel. And with my friends, my therapist, and okay fine, they're not my friends, they're slightly different kinds of leftist and I hate them. Anyway, if you haven't heard about it before, let's quickly go over liberalism. Liberalism is a word you've probably heard used to describe Democrats, but more accurately, the word applies equally to the two major US parties. In a liberal economy, the role of the state is to not exist, or exist just a tiny bit, and instead give the market the final say on who makes it out alive. It's survival of the fittest for companies, ideas, and people. And therefore whatever or whoever is left when the dust settles has earned their place no matter how they got there. To make sure none of the perfection of the market outcomes is perverted, you get pathetically weak safety nets in very liberal states. And because all-out competition is seen as the most legitimate way to decide what is good and what is bad, everything enters this competition and becomes commodified, from healthcare to schooling to basic necessities. Since markets are deemed to be the best at deciding what is good and what is bad, markets come to decide just about everything. Even though you couldn't ask for a more meritocratic system, it turns out this approach leads to a couple of things that don't really jibe with meritocracy. The obvious one is that being poor starts costing a lot more. In liberal markets, the poor are not only disadvantaged because they have less money, but also because money is increasingly needed to buy goods, services, and even opportunities for their children. In a deeply commodified regime, parents are left to purchase high-quality childcare, high-quality primary and secondary schooling, if only by moving into expensive neighborhoods, and high-quality college training, all of which means that opportunity itself has been commodified. In other words, the logic of markets and the fact that they favor the guy with money in his pocket means that there's no such thing as equal opportunity under supposedly meritocratic liberal regimes. That was a quote from the Poverty and Inequality Report, and it's only the first part of what's going on here. Structural issues like housing segregation, which reached its apex during the redlining era, play into very persistent feedback loops meant to trap people in poverty. Low-quality housing leads to low property taxes, which leads to underfunded schools and worse education than in the unaffordable private sector or in wealthier neighborhoods. Worse education holds people back, lowering incomes down the line and preventing them from getting better housing in neighborhoods with better schools, and you can tell where this is going. With a zip code alone, you can pretty reliably tell where someone will end up down the line. And that is a very clear problem for a country that wants to be a meritocracy. But this is also a problem for meritocracy itself. So long as meritocracy's reward is differential privilege that you can pass down, meritocracy dies in just a single generation. The problem with meritocracy is that if you play the game, you ruin it for everyone that comes after you. Imagine you use your big boy brain to make drinking water illegal unless it's from your premium service. Your kids will be far better off than the average person without ever having had that brilliant idea. The challenge for meritocracy is that it is incompatible with the economic system that champions it. But how did we even get to that point? The truth is that meritocracy, upward mobility, whatever you want to call it, is a relatively new cultural obsession. There is evidence that the idea of an aristocracy of talent dates back to the French and American revolutions. But the actual word meritocracy only appeared for the first time in the left-wing journal Socialist Commentary in an article by Alan Fox back in 1956. Needless to say, Fox doesn't love the term he seems to have come up with, putting it in sarcastic quotes and dropping lines like, "This way lies the meritocracy, the society in which the gifted, the smart, the energetic, the ambitious, and the ruthless are carefully sifted out and helped towards their destined positions of dominance, where they proceed not only to enjoy the fulfillment of exercising their natural endowments, but also to receive a fat bonus thrown in for good measure." For Fox, and eventually Michael Young, a writer who would pick up and popularize the term 2 years later with his dystopian novel The Rise of the Meritocracy, meritocracy has only ever been one thing: a way for the elite to reproduce their class, to set the rules of the game in a favorable way to their own privileges, and then to coat them in enough positive morality to make it seem like an inherently good way to structure our society. But this doesn't happen naturally. It turns out it's really hard to convince people that what they want is a system where if they're not smart enough by the system's standards, that they're not deserving of the safety and luxury of the few at the top. So, the same way that a Pepsi ad sells you a fizzy brown drink with footage of a made-up protest, liberation movements of the 60s were entirely co-opted by the emergent neoliberal capitalist regime. Real anger and demands for change were brought into the fold of the economy that produced them in a series of subtle reforms by social democratic and third-way politicians in the UK and the US, who came to embrace terms like meritocracy while completely ignoring their origins as dystopian vocabulary. It's like if 25 years from now, the Democratic candidate was the pro-Hunger Games guy, because when you think about it, isn't a lottery-based battle royale actually a very meritocratic way to decide who gets food? The result of these political movements is that instead of addressing the structural inequalities faced and resisted by women, racial minorities, members of the LGBT community, and the poor, the new narrative became that it is success within the rat race, not its abolition, that is revolutionary. Of course, that never materialized, and marginalized people are mostly still kept down across the board. But the belief that there is some broad equality of opportunity has persisted. The few who do, quote-unquote, make it from the last remaining unequal starting lines are put in the spotlight and turned into symbols of social progress to shame the many more who never do. So, concretely, what do you get from meritocracy? Evidently not upward mobility, nothing resembling social equality in the least. But most of all, you get entitlement for those who do succeed. And entitlement at the top breeds many things, not least of all a conservative view that the status quo is justified. In that sense, meritocracy, and the very real belief in it, acts as a great way to pacify any movement for social change, to reject any form of redistribution of wealth, to deny the fact that structural factors, or even simple luck, can result in dramatic differences in outcome. Those who are given outsized power are the very same who have benefited from things staying exactly as they are, creating a deeply conservative logic within a movement meant to be the progressive alternative to hereditary privilege. The common good goes out the window. Taken to its extreme, a meritocratic regime raises questions among those at the top, like, why bother with democratic dialogue if order has already been achieved in such a just and fair way? Figures on the right jump on these narratives to justify their own power and the repression of democracy. People like Musk, Bezos, and their billionaire buddies are glorified by hordes of weird nerds who come to distrust the average person, who hasn't achieved nearly as much as their heroes. Grifters like Gary Vee and his cohort of inspirational entrepreneurs sell these narratives and contrast them with those coming from the left, making it seem like any structural analysis of injustice is jealous SJWs whining that they aren't as brilliant and hardworking as they are, not as willing to spend a supposed 18-hour day rising and grinding like a true Sigma. In short, these libs just don't know how to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They're just playing the victim card. And this is all because while meritocracy gives a theoretical right to everyone to achieve their full potential, it only gives access to that right to a minority, usually already selected from the elite. Now, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with the idea that society should support and actively incentivize the development of people's skills and interests, both for the benefit of individual people and society at large. The little differences that make us unique, bring us joy, and allow us to improve ourselves, our communities, and the world should be things we cultivate. What is wrong is the ocracy part of meritocracy. The idea that these differences should justify an upper class to form around these attributes. The idea that some enlightened elite should decide for the majority with no accountability is profoundly undemocratic. And we've seen how even small concessions to meritocracy lead to anything but a fair society. It is time to give up on the idea that it's all about equality of opportunity. The more we can instead democratize our economy and give everyone an equal say in the decisions that affect us all, the more easily we can escape the unjust social structure we have been sold as the ticket to our salvation. If you enjoyed this week's topic, I highly recommend you check out Happiness at Work on CuriosityStream. It's an hour-long documentary about how our relationship with work profoundly affects our mental state. And that is very relevant when talking about the rat race of meritocracy. CuriosityStream is an established streaming platform with a solid track record of caring about great educational content and the financial security of those who produce it. They've got thousands of nonfiction titles from some of the best filmmakers out there. As I've shared with you all many times before, YouTube doesn't treat its creators very well, especially its more left-wing channels. That's why some of my creator friends and I teamed up to build Nebula, so we don't have to worry about demonetization. CuriosityStream has supported our efforts from day one, so we're super happy to be able to offer this bundle deal, and get you guys access to Nebula basically for free. Nebula is home to content from all your favorite YouTubers, all completely ad-free. Between the two platforms, there really is something for everyone, and by signing up at the link below, you're helping us produce more content like my original series, The New F Word, which YouTube would never allow on its platform. Give CuriosityStream a shot, and get free access to Nebula when you sign up using the link below. It really does help support my channel, and educational creators all across YouTube. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more like it, consider subscribing to stay up to date with my latest episodes. If you hated it, go ahead and drop a thumbs down. You can check out my previous episodes by clicking the links on your screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.